unlocking your world of creativity with best-selling author and brand innovator, Mark Stinson. This episode is brought to you by White Cloud Coffee Roasters, where every bean tells a story of adventure. Visit whitecloudcoffee.com and use the code CREATIVITY.
Welcome back, friends, to our podcast, Your World of Creativity, where we like to explore inspiration and insight and imagination across almost every creative discipline and certainly across the world. I'm Mark Stinson. Today, we're going to dive deep into the terrain where art and animals and plants and creative practice overlap and meet. And my guest is Dr. Giovanni Aloi. Giovanni, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. Great to be here.
We're in Chicago, in the suburbs of Chicago today. Giovanni is an acclaimed author, educator, curator. He's editor-in-chief of a very interesting journal called Antennae, the Journal of Nature and Visual Culture. And he's recently published a new book, I'm Not an Artist, Reclaiming Creativity in the Age of Infinite Content. Wow, that's a provocative thought right off the bat, Giovanni.
Yes, I hope it is, because I hope that this book will trigger a conversation that's long overdue.
Yes. Right off, you open the book with a bold statement that really says the label artist is potentially holding us back. What inspired you to reframe, and how did you come to the conclusion that we need to dismantle this myth of, quote, artist?
Yes, that's exactly the reason why I think we need to dismantle it. It's a myth, right? As you just said. So the idea came from working for many years, started teaching in the early 2000s. So it's been 25 years of teaching and working in art schools as well as universities in the UK and the United States. And I see this repeating pattern that students who want to become artists come to institutions like universities and schools with a preformed idea of what an artist is. Unfortunately, this preformed idea is a myth that comes from popular culture and in part also from art history. The way art history has spoken to us about artists and what it has not told us about how Dali, Picasso, Van Gogh, all the big monsters of the last century have actually led careers, and some more successful than others. But what I noticed is that this myth of the artist as a mercurial character that's driven by emotion, always capricious and following instincts and passions, actually doesn't match the reality of the artists that I work with in the art world and who lead successful and sustainable careers today. What I've also noticed is that unfortunately this myth lives in the heads of students long enough, and it's rooted deep enough that it prevents them from finding their way through the art world once they graduate. And that really, I think, upset me. Because they come to art school to learn how to become artists. And instead at art school, they learn how to make art, which is a different thing. They are not prepared once they finish their undergraduate classes to face the art world. They haven't been taught how it works, what they need to do in order to gain visibility, what they need to do to build relationships that last. And most importantly, they have been misinformed about the value of making oneself visible and what it means to make yourself visible, which is not the same as self-promotion. There has been a demonization in art schools over the past 30 years on the idea of self-promoting and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the history of art, that it's always been about making yourself visible as an artist, crafting contacts that are very powerful and important and that can give you opportunities, as well as finding creative ways to make yourself marketable.
Yes.
I feel that we do not teach our students how to make themselves marketable. And that is the big issue.
Yes, it is. I couldn't help but to appreciate how you were connecting the art masters, the historical figures, with today's students. I recently resaw the musical Sunday in the Park with George, about George Surratt. And I thought, boy, I know the play is 30 years old, but I also couldn't help but observe the number of cliches and all the myths that you're talking about, the tortured artist, the underappreciated and underpromoted, as you've just been describing, and how that certainly could deserve a redefining,
Yes.
But you even go further than just the art student. You also talk about redefining everyday creativity. Yes, somebody could be a painter, but we might also be gardeners. We might also be designing our homes. We might be doing architectural design, all these ways of expressing everyday creativity. Where does this fall in this myth?
The idea of dismantling the myth of the artist, and even the idea of doing without the label artist, because I think labels are really important, right? Once we attach a label to ourselves, or others attach label to us, it's incredible the power these have to prevent us from thinking out of the box. And that's exactly what happens with the label artist. Lots of people think that it means utter freedom and the license to explore whatever you want, whenever you want. And actually, it's the opposite. What the artist label entails, it's a lot of constrictions, a lot of pressure, a lot of captivity, and a lot of very specific rules you must follow in order to become that person that eventually gets a solo show at MoMA. You don't get that show if that's what you want when you think, I want to be an artist. You don't get there by being volatile, capricious, and mercurial, and not holding down a very organized and regimented pathway, a very specific journey of development that professional artists undertake. And the idea of dismantling that myth is to make way, again, for creativity. Now, creativity is the engine of this world. And that's where we get to the connection between a more organic conception of being a creative individual here in this moment, connecting to others, in opposition to the idea of the artist as it has passed on to us, been passed on to us as a romantic myth. So the romantic myth of the artist is solitary, the solitary genius that creates in a moment of passion that doesn't have to be explained or excused. Instead, what I see when I work with successful artists is that they are much more oriented towards a focus on their surroundings and the connection between them and others. There's a collaborative approach in which artists thrive because nobody can do it all on their own. The art world is an ecosystem. That's what people like to say all the time, but I don't think anyone truly stops to think what it really means. It means that we need to build symbiotic relationships with each other, where you benefit from me and I benefit from you, and together we make things happen. That's how it's always been among art historians, artists, museum curators over time. It's just not something those in the art world talk about openly to those who want to become artists.
Yes.
It is a very precious thing we have today, I think, that creativity has to be recovered, and there's a possibility for it to recover it because of the changes that have happened during the pandemic, because of the pressure that institutions are coming under. We know that museums perhaps are not the highest or best place we could aspire to be in when our dream is to be an artist. There are artists who make fantastic work in communities, really helping people in a different kind of wavelength, scale, and modality. There are artists who really put their creativity at work to solve problems. They don't want to have a picture hanging at the Art Institute, right? Well, being an artist means to everyone anymore. And creativity is at the bottom of it all. I think creativity expresses itself in so many ways in everything we do throughout the day. It's also what brings us closer to animals and plants.
I'm glad you're bringing this up because I wanted to pick up on that word ecosystem, but flip it to your work with art and animals, the title of one of your books. But so, how this idea of animals making art. We think of leopards and slugs and spiders and birds, all the things that we see design in nature. You've really challenged that question and answered it in a different way. What does that really help us understand creativity when we look at animals?
I think the art world, art history, museums have, over the past 200 years, confused us about what art is and what creativity is. And you cannot have art without creativity, but you have creativity everywhere around you. Whether it becomes art or not, that's a construction, right? Art in our society is something that we buy and we sell, we write about, we hang on a wall, and we display. So the question of animal intelligence is what helps us to recover creativity. Animals are creative at every moment through their lives, and so are we. It's just that we're being told that there's higher hierarchies of creativity and lower hierarchies that don't matter. And yet, what I think the happiest I am in my life is when I have the possibility to indulge in my creativity. And sometimes that can be making a salad or just tending to the garden, organizing something in the community. It could be solving problems that can make life easier or better for me and my neighbors. It's certainly the engine of the world. And I think what I see more and more in the art world is that contemporary artists want to put their creative abilities to the service of society. That doesn't mean that painting is dead or that we shouldn't go to museums, but it means that an artist can do many more things than just think about the wall at MoMA on which they dream to have their work. And also in this context, we find the question of the failed artist, right? That haunts so many people. If you shift the focus from that traditional pathway that only leads you to have a picture on the wall in a museum and a spot in an art history book, to actually becoming an active agent in your society, in your life, then the reward also changes. You're not thinking about posterity. We've been obsessed with this life that might go on forever. The idea that being an artist means you're immortal. It's not true. Artists get forgotten. The only reasons why a handful of them from the 19th century and the last century are constantly remembered is because we are bombarded by marketing machines that organize and support exhibitions in museums, publications, right? So look at all the foundations that are behind Picasso, Van Gogh, all the big Dalis, all the big monsters of the last century are constantly kept afloat and in our memories by enormous marketing machines.
Yes. And isn't it true that most artists aren't even appreciated in their time?
Oh,
That it's only later that we look back at their work and say, oh, what a genius.
Yeah.
But oftentimes contemporary and peers and the powerful often don't appreciate their work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is no assurance that the myth of the artist may materialize itself in any shape or form. Even what you're describing now, it's an if and a maybe. We don't know that might happen. So if you're choosing a career path, as you say, I want to be an artist, the image in your mind of what kind of artist you want to be is extremely important. And of course, students, young people in their 20s might not know what range of opportunities are available to them in that sense. So what I try to do with this book and also with the course that I teach at the School of the Art Institute is to show them the many ways they can be an artist, ways that don't entail only focusing on museums and art history books as the ultimate accolade of success. If you shift from art and artist to creativity expressed through different media, then you can never fail as long as you find what you do rewarding and useful.
Yes.
If
And
what you
I even read one of your blogs went a step further into, I think you used the word generosity. But
Mhm.
if you move from creativity to generosity and apply your art in an act of caring, and you've been talking about neighborhoods or societal impact, it's a
Mhm.
whole different way to look at your art.
Yeah, I think about reciprocity, and I think about especially how we can start to think at artistic careers as creative careers that reflect ecological models, right? So instead of thinking about abundance today and everything, getting everything to, how can we learn from animals and plants to be more parsimonious, for instance? How can we become patient like a plant, waiting for a season or missing out on a season and waiting for the next? Thinking about the art world as an ecology or as an ecosystem doesn't just necessarily mean, oh, there are different parts that need each other to survive. What I'm trying to do is to push this further and actually shape our creativity, reshape our creativity from the models that have been imposed upon us by capitalism and institutions on models of creativity that we find around us in nature. It doesn't necessarily mean that those models are going to make you rich, right? If you want to become an artist because you want to become famous and rich, those are the wrong reasons to want to become an artist. There are only about a handful of people who accomplish that. And as we know, fame comes and goes as well as money. And there are so many careers that burn through. Within a couple of years, we never hear about those artists anymore. Nobody knows what they do with the rest of their lives, and it's over. And what I'm advocating for is a shift of focus on creativity so that we can embark on a journey where creativity is the goal, being as creative as you can. And then you will never find yourself in that devastated scenario because what you're following is a natural development of your creative self, not one, you're not complying with one that it's been imposed upon you by capitalist systems that institutions keep repeating and imposing upon you.
Yes. And to make this quite timely and practical, on my next episode, Giovanni, I'm interviewing a young lady who just received her master's in fine arts, literally just walked off the stage with the piece of paper. Where could you see a next step for someone like that, applying some of the principles and concepts you've just been describing?
Yes, that's one of the most delicate moments. I think there's a misconception here again caused by the myth of the artist that a fresh graduate might get snapped up by somebody who will open up doors for them. It's like winning the lottery, right? That happens to 1 in 10 million people or more. You cannot make that your business plan. Nobody says, I want to be rich. Here's my business plan. I'm going to play the lottery every week. It doesn't work like that. And my recommendation is to apply this organic approach to creativity by, first of all, looking around your territory. With my students, I use a metaphor that's related to a German scientist called von Oxkoll, who studied how ticks develop a field of interest around them. And a tick is a pretty basic animal, but it spends time waiting on a blade of grass, smelling the air and sensing heat to find out where around it might find food. And then you can just build your map of interesting places to go as a tick where you might find what you need, whether it's humidity, whether it's blood, whether it's whatever you need. it's not a pretty picture sometimes, right? I'm not advocating for a celestial world of art where everyone is necessarily friendly and everyone is like in harmony. Dissonance is everywhere around us, right? What I'm advocating for, it's for awareness of your connections and the connections you can form with your environment. And that is ecological. So I tell my students, look out. Which galleries are interesting to you? Which publications are within reach? Who do you know already around you that can become a symbiotic partner? Who might become a parasite? And what I tell them is take time, because that is exactly what the artist myth has messed up. The artist myth has everything happening out of the blue. It's sudden, it's an explosion, and that's not really part of a long-term plan. What I want my students to have is a long and rewarding career. And by taking time to get to know your symbiotic partners in your environment, you will stand a chance to succeed. The most successful people I see around me, the most successful artists I see around me in my communities in Chicago, have been at it for 50 years. They don't give up because they're not just emailing a gallery hoping that they'll look at the pictures and say, yay, we love your work. We'll exhibit it next week. You'll be a star. They build relationships slowly over the years. And these relationships pay off because people know you. People will be interested in supporting you because you're supporting them. Back to the symbiosis. When these relationships, these networks really begin to thrive because there is positivity and there is a desire to do interesting things, I think that's success. That's a success that I'm interested in. And that's a success I hope my students can get to. And artists who want to be successful, that's a success. And funny thing is that one day, if you go down these pathways and you stay in your environment, in your ecology, and you keep nurturing it, and you keep the reciprocity going, one day, maybe later on when you're 60 or 70, the wind will still blow you into MoMA. But guess what? MoMA was not your objective. You didn't like trash relationship and scream and pull and push to get there. And it makes all the difference to your life, I think.
Yes, so strong, so inspirational. Giovanni, what a great conversation. Before we close, I do have one other question, but I want to make sure people know where to find you, how to follow your work. Where's the best way to connect with you?
I tend to be quite present on Instagram, so you can find me if you search the handle dr.aloi, dr.aloi. And I also have a website, which is www.aloi.info, where I keep my updates, I share updates, and I keep some of my book samples and other materials that can be helpful.
Sure. We'll put those links in the show notes along with a link to the book. We've been talking about your book, I'm Not an Artist, Reclaiming Creativity in the Age of Infinite Content. And I think I'd like to close on that last little part of the subtitle. It is an age of infinite content. So we've talked about all the ways to explore the ecosystem, but wow, what a jungle of content we're working in.
Yeah, indeed. And that's one of the reasons why I think I really wanted to put this book out there now, because this is another moment of incredible crisis. It's a radical shift that students and artists in general will have to address. What does it mean to make art at a time where avalanches of more art are being bestowed upon us? That's where the idea of creativity and focusing on that creative process as the goal, I think, begins to really make sense, because all these objects, all these creating objects that artists have been told they should do, will be just covered by more piles of objects and more objects that the world doesn't need ecologically, but that people will also struggle to see. There's so much already around us.
So true. Thanks for the provocative and inspirational thoughts. Giovanni, what a pleasure talking to you.
Great pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you so much, Mark.
Oh, you bet. Thank you. And thanks, listeners, for joining us on your world of creativity. And before we go, a big shout out to our sponsor, White Cloud Coffee Roasters. You can enjoy a 10% discount on your first order when you visit whitecloudcoffee.com and use the word creativity at checkout. And be sure to subscribe and rate and review your world of creativity on your favorite podcast app. We'll see you next time as we continue our around the world journeys to talk to creative practitioners everywhere about how they get inspired and how they organize ideas, and most of all, how they get inspired to launch their work out into the world, turning this inspiration into action, as Giovanni has encouraged us to do today. So until next time, I'm Mark Stinson, and we'll keep exploring your world of creativity. Bye for now.